Hey y'all. Oh my God, I love you so much. Thank you all for joining me. I see you and I feel you all the way from here. I'm coming at you from Ground Zero, which is a place I come to often to reflect, especially when things are hard and scary, which they are right now in this moment. And I'll just give you a look at kind of where we are. I sort of love that they never filled in these spaces or replaced these buildings because they're such an open reminder of what we lost. My stepdad, Lieutenant Joseph Levy, was one of the first firemen to respond on 9/11. He actually saw the second plane hit and ran right into the building up 78 flights of stairs, saved countless lives along the way, broke right into the floor of impact and stepped into the fire. And we know this because we recovered the radio transmissions from his final moments in the tower. He was last heard at 9:57 a.m., just 2 minutes before the tower collapsed, literally right here in this moment. And he said to his men, "I'll be right to you." I often imagine what it must have felt like to be in the face of so much fear and destruction and do the right thing anyway. And I just don't mean the first responders and the firefighters. I mean everyone who showed up that day for one another. And that's always been how I've remembered 9/11. Retaliation just never felt right to me. It felt contradictory to the sacrifices that were made on that day. But since 9/11, we have given into a culture of retaliation that has enabled policies of discrimination, surveillance, incarceration, and even death. Many of us have witnessed and even allowed the harassment of innocent American citizens based on the color of their skin or their religion. And as if losing 2,996 people on 9/11 wasn't enough, it is estimated that 1.3 million people have been killed in the war on terror since 9/11. That isn't the cost of our freedom, that is the price of our fear. And a small faction of extremists who organized the event that day were not from any of the countries listed on Trump's executive ban. In fact, the largest number of terrorist acts in the US since 9/11 have come from the US. In the last 15 years, more people have been killed by homegrown extremists than Islamist terrorists. And so that brings me to President Trump, who has not only used fear and propaganda to further his political agenda, he has used us, all of us who have suffered and grieved and lost, and to exploit our suffering, the loss of so many lives, the epic sacrifices and bravery of first responders and veterans, the many innocent communities that have been impacted since that day, is a huge insult. As a family member and a citizen, there is nothing about this president's character and actions that holds a candle to the patriotism that was demonstrated on that day. And I don't just mean the kind of patriotism that puts love of our country above love for one another. I mean a citizenship of humanity. I am not just afraid for my Muslim friends who are facing blatant discrimination, or our immigrant families who could be torn apart. I am afraid for all of us because this administration is going to get us killed. And any event or attack that might happen to us, God forbid, will have been inflamed and agitated by Trump's right-hand man, Steve Bannon, an unelected, unqualified consultant who is recklessly advancing his political agenda at the expense of our security and safety. The policies of this administration are immoral and unsafe and have nothing to do with 9/11 and everything to do with their game. They are an affront to who we were on that day and to who we are as Americans. We deserve a leadership that is strong and good. And that doesn't need to be a trade-off. We don't need to cause suffering to feel safe. We simply need to remember the many people in our country who have fought and sacrificed for the good of humanity. That is who we are. So I will not for one more moment, let this president invoke the memory of 9/11, the memory of my stepdad, and call it America first. This is Trump first, this is Bannon first, and this is money first. But it will not be in Joe's name. Joe and his men believed in sacrificing themselves for the greater good. They didn't discriminate based on who gets to be saved and who doesn't. They ran into that building for all of us. So I invite my whole 9/11 community, all of the families, all of those who have been impacted by that day, to consider who and what we lost. And if this president's policies are a true reflection of that, because we have lost too much to be lied to, exploited, and played. Joe was a religious man. He believed in God, but even more so, he believed in people. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And he and so many did extraordinary things on that day. Not the government, not any one person in power, all of us. And so we need to remember who we are, people for people, and fight against anything that gets in the way of that, because everything is at stake. Thank you.